What's so awesome about Pia is she's not like a typical community builder. She is a marketer and she runs a marketing agency, and she just organically fell into this world of community building, which, by the way, everyone in community like falls into this world of community building. But she's so smart and she's so strategic, and she's like inadvertently, maybe accidentally, but also because she's brilliant, done all the right things along the way. And she'd probably be the first to tell you that she's done the right things because she's tested and tried out some of the things that don't work. So we go into so many layers of her community evolution, but we especially focus on leadership development here in this episode. And I'm so grateful for a glimpse into the brilliance from Pia and how that has been manifested in her community. So much to learn on this one. You're going to want to send it to a friend. So get out a notebook because you're going to be taking notes. Welcome to Dear Bree, an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. This season of Dear Bree is sponsored by our friends over at Heartbeat. Heartbeat is an all-in-one community platform, and it's the one I chose to host my own community. Your members can finally have events, conversation, content, and even courses in one distraction-free, intimate, customized home. I chose Heartbeat for 3 reasons. First, Heartbeat is unparalleled in their events management features. Events are a core part of my community architecture, and their features make my life so much easier. Second is segmentation. It's super easy to break my community into smaller, more niche subgroups and create a more customized experience for that group in Heartbeat. And finally, their courses. Being able to host my educational materials and learning journey in a community-first platform makes my community that much more valuable and retention that much stickier. I'm an affiliate with Heartbeat, which means when you sign up through my link in the show notes, I get paid a small amount at no extra charge to you. Thank you for supporting my work in that way. And finally, I usually record this podcast from Hawaii Island, so a special thank you to the Kanaka Maoli people on whose land I currently reside. Our guest today is the founder of No BS Agency Mastery, where she teaches 1 to 2 person branding agencies to scale to 30K months without employees. She's a TEDx speaker, host of the No BS Agency podcast, and the author of Badass Your Brand. Pia's community has been running since 2021. And I am always excited to host any community person that is past the 3-year mark, because not only have you successfully launched your community, but you've seen it evolve. You've adapted to your members and how they're changing, and the change always brings with it some juicy drama, which I can't lie that I love. So Pia Silva, thank you so much for being with us today. We're delighted to have you on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Bree. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Are you ready for the letter I have prepared for you today?
I'm so ready.
Dear Bree, I'm writing because I'm desperately in need of advice on an issue I'm experiencing in my community. I've been managing and nurturing this space for a while now, and it's grown into something I'm genuinely proud of. But here's the problem. Somehow, I've become the person everyone is dependent upon for value. Members rarely contribute independently or take initiative unless I'm there initiating discussions, providing answers, or creating content. At first, it felt really rewarding to be such a critical resource, and now it's exhausting. I worry that my community can't survive without me constantly feeding it, and honestly, it's taking a toll on my mental health and motivation. I'm not sure how to shift this dynamic without disappointing or losing my members. How do I encourage community members to contribute more independently? How can I reshape expectations so that I'm not always the only one holding everything together? Thank you for any wisdom. I could really use some perspective. Signed, Burnt Out and Bound by Dependency. Pia, do you have any initial impressions or anything that resonates with you from this letter?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything about that resonates with me. I was absolutely there at a certain point in my journey, and it's been a journey to get out of it too. We can totally talk about all of that.
Yeah. So tell us more. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about your community, how it got started and maybe some of those seasons where you felt like it was a little bit more dependent on you.
Sure. So I started in 2021, early 2021, and the whole purpose of this community is really a training program to teach my niche, 1 to 2 person branding agencies, this very specific business model that I developed with my husband when we were running our own branding agency. So the purpose was really a training and teaching, and then I needed the community to support people's learning, right? I needed a place where people could go and ask questions in between our calls and hopefully share their wins and connect with each other. So the community wasn't initially the biggest part of the business, but it quickly became the thriving piece because it's the place that people went every single day to check in. It's where people got to know each other. People would share their wins and get a lot of great feedback and other people cheering them on, which we all know is so important in business where we don't get a lot of that kind of positive feedback. And then also, of course, asking questions. And we started our community on Facebook. And about 2 years in, we moved to Circle. I will say that when we were on Facebook, there was a lot of interaction, but I felt very much like I was where the reader is right now, which is I had to be in there, multiple times a day. I was constantly checking Facebook. I felt like I needed to respond to everybody and I needed to respond to them as quickly as possible. I felt like that was a big reason they were in here was because they were getting my immediate feedback. And Facebook is actually really hard to manage in that respect. So I would lose track of posts. And then anytime somebody didn't get an answer pretty quickly, then they would be upset and I would feel bad, but they had no idea that I was always checking and I just happened to miss it. And I had all kinds of systems where I had my VA trying to manage the posts and send me links. And I did a lot of things. Anyway, we moved to Circle because it was much easier to manage all of that. But we had to train our community to post on Circle. And that was really challenging. When we moved to Circle, one of our intentions was that I would not answer as quickly. So we took advantage of the fact that we were moving platforms to reset the system and reset expectations. And mistake number 1 that I made was that I did not communicate that very well. So what we did was when we moved over, we created like a challenge and we made it like a whole party. We had a party where everybody moved their best posts, like copy and pasted them into Circle so we could pre-populate it.
I love that idea.
Yeah. So everybody took their best posts and repopulated. And then I did a challenge for like a month or 2 where the people who posted the most got prizes. So there were all these prizes and there was a big grand prize. I don't remember what it was, but I think it was a mini intensive with me, a brand shrink with me. So it's a really big prize. And that got people commenting and logging in to try to get this prize. So that's how we got onto Circle. But after that, the participation dwindled a little bit. And I think what really brought it back was a lot of some automated things that we started doing. We started posting during our calls on Monday, a Monday momentum post where everybody on the call would post their intentions for the week, their goals for the week. And then my VA, reposts on a Wednesday post and a Friday post and tags them. How did you do with these 3 intentions? So we do that Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that was pulling people in. We started reminding people about wins. I just felt like I had to constantly remind people, hey, show up and post this. Hey, calling people out for their wins. Hey, we want to hear more about this. But eventually they retrained and our Circle community is now a thriving place. There is a lot of activity in there now. So that has to do with just them posting and sharing. And then the other piece is really about anointing my support coaches and trying to take the kind of magic fairy dust that I have because I'm the reason people join the program and putting it on my coaches so that when my coaches answer the questions, the students feel like they got the answer. They're not waiting for Pia to answer the question.
That's so good. Okay, I want to pause right there because I want to hear a lot more about the leadership development because I think this is like, you absolutely shine in this area. And it's something that far too people wait too long to think about in their community and implementing. But first, what I heard you say was that number 1,
the expectations for engagement were that behavior was normalized and habituated, and you were using a technology where the normalized behaviors were not aligned with how you wanted to show up in the space. In Facebook, people expect like it's fast, everyone's always there, you're always available, you're going to get a quick response. And I heard you turn that into that negative. You turned into a positive when you did the migration and you saw an opportunity to do a reset on those expectations. And I think a lot of people go into Circle not aware of how much responsibility and how much work it's going to be to habituate your members to a new technology where they don't know what the rules are. They haven't been in a Circle community. They don't know, is this a fast-paced space? Is this a slow space? How do we interact here? And so I heard you share a really intentional migration and reset, even if maybe you're like, okay, we maybe could have communicated that a little bit better. It sounds like you did quite a few things that actually created and normalized the behaviors that you really want to see.
That is so eloquently summarized, Brie. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I also want to call out the thing that you shared of like on the Zoom call, chatting the link and saying, rather than saying, add your goal for the week in the Zoom chat, you say, we're going to add the link to the thread in the Zoom chat, open it up, take the next 3 minutes and write down your goal for the week. I love this. It's what I call creating a bridge into existing technology. So on a Zoom call, like we all know how to use Zoom. We're very familiar with that technology. The Circle community was new. They're like, again, we don't really know how to talk. Like, is it safe to talk in here? We don't really know. And so you created a bridge. You said on the Zoom call itself, we're going to bring in the new technology into the old known technology. And that's one of the best methods for getting people to slowly adopt the new technology in the way that you want them to. So I really loved that note. That was such a good nugget.
Yeah. And we also, so on that Monday call, we do two things. First, we celebrate our wins, and everybody posts those also on our wins post in Circle. So that's also so that we can have a record of it and everyone can see their wins. Yeah, it's like forcing people to go there. At the very least, they're going to sign in on Mondays and they're going to post, and then they might see other stuff and interact. So I think that had a lot to do with it.
So let's continue talking about the leadership development. How early on did you start to recognize like, oh, there's people in here who really get it? And did you like know what to do with them? How did you know when and where to start looking for leaders? And then how did you identify them? And then what did you do with them once you had them?
Oh my gosh. I looked for support coaches much earlier than I think I was ready to have them. I looked for support coaches from outside actually at first. And there were a couple of people I tried to bring in to help shoulder the support aspect of this program. And they never quite worked out, probably because they weren't totally embedded in our community. They didn't understand the way that I work. They weren't branding agencies. So one thing I learned was that I needed to wait until some of my earliest clients were far enough along in the process to be able to coach and to have had a lot of success, like enough success that they would be able to show up as support coaches, both because they have the time and energy to do it, because were making more money and have more time, because they had the success. They've had enough success that they can command that kind of respect from the people who are newer, and also have the time to get coached on being a coach, because I'm not coaching coaches. I think when people have coaching programs where they coach coaches, it's really easy to find coaches, but my people aren't coaches, they're branding agencies. So I needed to also coach them into becoming coaches in our community. So I started doing it much earlier than it actually ended up happening. The first coaches that I brought on were out of pure necessity because I have my main program, but I also have a starter program. It's not something I advertise, but I have a smaller price point, smaller touch points program for people who are not quite ready for our main program. And that's the first place that I brought a couple of my star students into to help me coach and then eventually take over. So now they coach that completely. And I think when I experienced the transition where in that smaller program, students started tagging my coaches and not me in the posts, I knew I had done it. I said, we just crossed the chasm, right? Like they don't expect me to answer everything anymore. And in fact, they're really looking to their coaches, my students.
Beautiful.
So I knew it was possible. It took a lot longer for me to get there with my mastery program because the mastery program is a much bigger investment. It's a much longer engagement. They do get a lot more of me already. So I ended up bringing a couple of coaches up here and there. They never led anything. I just started to position them as also helping. I started getting them to answer questions and I would also answer. And sometimes I started trying to answer questions after my coaches answered them and simply saying, I love what Sarah said. Spot on, no notes. So I started doing that more and more so that I wasn't adding additional ideas on and making the students think, oh, okay, well, let's see what Pia says. So that was one thing that worked really well. And then another thing that really made the transition happen more was starting to show the coaches in the very beginning. So I've started bringing some of my coaches onto the welcome call that I do live with my students. That's one thing. I have videos of all the coaches saying hello, like a short video of who they are and what they've experienced in implementing this model in their business right in the beginning of the training. So they see them. And then they run certain breakout rooms when we do our coaching calls. So people go into different rooms and that's made a huge difference.
I love that. Oh my gosh. I can just imagine the celebration when you're like, it's not all on me. That's brilliant. So how does it work with I can imagine that the questions are popping up for our listeners. What's your compensation model for leaders? Like, are they volunteers? Do you pay them? Is it like, what's the structure for them?
Yep. So they get in-kind payment of continuing to be a part of our program. So they're like my most successful students. And there's kind of the highest level of training for them, which is not as much video content. There's really not as much to teach them. It's smaller things and it's more about opportunities to get some higher level coaching. They get access to me in a way that nobody else does, right? They're in my Slack. There's kind of an unofficial understanding. I don't spend a ton of time with them, but I'm here to answer their questions about their businesses whenever they need it. They grandfathered in something that I used to offer that I don't offer anymore to my more advanced students, which is a quarterly call with me. So they get that. I pay for them all to come to our in-person retreat. So fly them to New York, pay for their hotel, and they are leaders at the retreat, but I pay for that. And then I also compensate them on a monthly basis, depending on what they're doing, between $500 and $1,000 a month.
Amazing. Wow. Did you ever have an experience where you thought someone was a leader and then they turned out not to be a great leader or a great coach? And how did you handle it?
Yes, that did happen. It was a tough situation. I had somebody who they showed up with a lot of enthusiasm, but over time, I started to realize that they were actually really out of integrity with how they were running their business and how they were showing up. And because they weren't being completely honest with me, it took me a while to see it. So once I realized that they weren't actually practicing what they preached, they weren't really walking the walk, and that their advice was therefore pretty hollow and it was pretty shallow, it was really tough. It was one of the earlier people, so I didn't realize that when I first brought them on. And frankly, I was a busy business owner who was like juggling a million things, and I was just happy that somebody else was able to support my people. I had to be really strategic and thoughtful about how I carefully backed them out of it. And I did it as kindly as possible. I actually tried to graduate them into like a different role first. And it made sense for where they were in their business and what they were trying to do. I said, you're really not doing this anymore, so it doesn't make sense for you to coach this. So why don't we move you into this role so I could extract them without disrupting the community? And that worked really well. So that by the time they left, they weren't really embedded in the community anymore. But I have to say, like, I had to be really thoughtful and strategic about that, because When somebody is so embedded in your business and working with all of your students, it's really important that it doesn't blow up and lose the trust of the community and all of that. So I did it over months. I did it over months very carefully so that it didn't harm the community. It ended up working out great, but I couldn't have known that. It was really scary when it first happened.
This podcast is sponsored by Ember Consulting, where I'm the founder and head community creator. At Ember, we help people who are familiar with running their business on content, coaching, or consulting become community powered. As you hear in this podcast, creating a community is really tough and managing it can be even harder. So don't do it alone. Whether you're looking to launch a new community or pivot your strategy, our one-on-one consulting helps you skip the learning curve and do it right the first time. And when you're ready to belong to a space just for community creators learning, testing, and growing their communities together, check out the Ember community. Now, back to the episode.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in the slow speed at which you addressed that issue. It sounds like it was progressive. It sounds like you didn't rush. I think as soon as we find misalignment within our leadership, it can be really tempting. Like, it's a really scary moment because you're like, this person has authority in the community and they could either steer this community in the wrong direction if we continue to trust them and elevate them in this position of authority. So I've been in that position, and I think the younger Brie was perhaps a little too rash in some of the ways that I guided or had to address different leadership issues in communities past. So I think that's really smart to take it slow and to frame it in a way that is a win-win-win for everyone. Win for you, win for the leader, and a win for your community, which that's the Tetris game we play as community builders, is finding the win-win-win.
It's such a great way of putting it. Yeah. Above all else, how can I protect everybody in this space and make everyone feel like putting the best interest at heart? And sometimes that doesn't work.
Yes.
For everybody. And just trying to do it with kindness and calmness, even though maybe behind the scenes I was incredibly upset about it. I'm upset.
Yeah.
You find out someone is not being truthful with you.
Yeah.
It can cause a lot of bad feelings, but it's important to keep it cool because that's how you protect everybody else who's involved.
Yeah. Was it just you who realized it, or were other members cluing into it as well?
I think I have cultivated an environment low to no gossip. And so I think it took a while for some of my other coaches and people to start saying, hey, could you just look at this? Or I'm not sure about this. And then a couple of different people said that to me. And then I was like, okay, like what? Tell me what you're seeing. I was like, it's okay. Like, I need to know. And actually a couple people came to me and said, listen, I hate to do this, but like, you need to know that this is happening. And that's when I said, oh, okay. And then it kind of came out, yeah, I've kind of been noticing this for months, but I didn't want to say anything because nobody wants to throw anybody under the bus. And I think I look at that and think, well, that's a positive thing. I like that our community is like that. Even behind the scenes, my team is like that. We're not talking behind each other's backs. I think that's really important. But this was so egregious. At a certain point, they were like, no, I really need to tell you that this is going on. I was like, thank you for telling me. I kind of thought that, but I had no evidence and everyone seemed to be totally fine with it. So I don't know where that line is.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm actually experiencing this in a community right now that I'm a part of. That line between keeping a really like positive and strong culture where like we're all for each other and balancing that with the honesty and transparency that like sometimes there's stuff going down that like needs to be brought into the light. And how do we do that and conduct that in a way that is honoring to everyone? That's a really important question.
Yeah. Well, when they eventually completely left and severed ties, not in the kindest way, I had to tell our team and like the larger team too, because I have my core team, but then I have about like 10 support coaches. So it's a lot of people. And it was uncomfortable because I had to get on this call. I said, I'm going to tell you what happened in the shortest, like most emotionless way possible. because you need to know. And I don't want people talking about this behind. I don't want everyone wondering what happened, why they're not here. This is what happened. And everyone was like, thank you for sharing. And we're glad. And we support you. And frankly, I never heard about it again. And I think that was really important to say it and be like, I don't want to talk about this. And I don't want everyone talking about this. And I don't want this person also, I don't want them getting thrown under the bus. I certainly don't want to start rumors about them. So we just all need to know that that's what happened. And now we're putting it to bed. And it worked out really well.
Yeah, that's really good. I think a lot of community builders need to hear that, because it's very tempting to sweep those messy relationships, those messy dynamics under the rug and just hope that they don't affect the rest of the community. But I think when you do that, it gives the situation way more power, rather than if you like nip it in the bud, if you take the confidence and authority as the leader to be fully transparent. I actually think it loses the weight and the power to make it more messy.
100%.
Pia, this is so lovely. Do you have any other advice for our dear letter writer, burnt out and bound by dependency?
Yeah, I think for me, what's been really helpful is having a really clear vision of where I want to be in the next 2 years, how I want to be interacting with the community, how I want my students to see me, and how much interaction I want them to have with me, and what it would look like, what my team would have to look like for that to work. So I have so many people on my team, which sounds like a lot, but for me, I wanted there to be a lot of different people supporting the group also, because I didn't want to be relying on 2 support coaches who then everyone is looking at. And then if one of them leaves, it's created this big hole in our business. So I'm purposefully sharing the load with a lot of people so that no one person, I mean, I hope they all stay with me forever because I love them all, but people grow and all of them are super successful in their businesses. So I imagine at some point, some of them are going to say, okay, I think I'm ready for the next step. And I want to make my own community, for example. So I need there to be enough of them that doesn't rock the boat when that happens. That's just how I'm looking at it, but more to the reader, just figuring out what you want it to look like and what the ideal vision is so that you can work backwards to get there.
That's really good. I love the diversification of the leadership team. And I think that's ultimately stronger for you and for your community, for those responsibilities to be. How many, just to give us like a context here, how many members do you have in your community for these 10 support coaches?
There's 7 support coaches, and then I also have pod leaders. So It's actually more than 10 if you include all the pod leaders. So it's 13 people. I have about 120 people, but a lot of the systems we're putting in place are really so we can basically double enrollment in the next couple of years and not lose that intimate feeling. So I wanted to get to a place where we could double and people could still join and feel like they're seen, feel like they're not just one of 200 people in here. And I think having a lot of support coaches is helping with that.
Absolutely. Oh, this is so good. You're right at that cusp of the Dunbar number.
Yes.
Have we talked about this?
Well, I'm just familiar with it.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, the Dunbar number was created by, I don't know his first name, this guy, last name Dunbar, who was a sociologist and studied human evolution. And within the context of our gathering in the society. And what he discovered was that humans really have the capacity for one-to-one connections with about 125, 150 people. And this comes from the typical sizes of the villages that we have evolved from. And I think about this a lot in the context of online communities. And what's that number? Online relationships are so tricky because it gives you this illusion that you have a greater capacity for them because they're like driving to go meet a friend is a lot more effort than just hopping on a call, right? But in essence, we still can't really move past the number of connections that we can maintain. So you're right at the cusp. You're right at that tipping point in your community where I tell people, hey, this has probably felt really magical and beautiful and intimate. And you're entering a new phase of your community where the affiliation from your members has to move from an affiliation and a connection with this big group to an affiliation and a connection with a small group inside of this bigger community. What I hear you saying is you're already building for that. You've got the leadership foundation, which will essentially take the relationships in this big community and tie them more strategically to a small group experience with their leader. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of how we have done that recently. So the way we implemented pods, which I know a lot of people want to implement accountability groups, mastermind groups. We tried a bunch of different things. I feel like we really mastered this. We decided that they had to have a leader. They couldn't be self-led, which is why we have so many pod leaders. And they had to be run during our calls. So we actually take up every other call with a pod meeting. And they're very structured, and they're a room with a pod leader and about 6 or 7 members. And every quarter we switch the pods, and they're very intentional. We ask people have to opt in for the pods. So they have to opt in and they have to agree. We tell them exactly what the dates are, and they have to agree that they're going to come to all of that. It's not perfect, but a lot of people opt in. And for the most part, people show up. And to me, it's a huge part of being in this is that you get to be in this pod and meet these same people every other week for a quarter. You've made a bunch of friends. Now you're going to go into a different pod for the next quarter and make a bunch. By the time you've been in it for a year, you have a lot of connections in our community. So even though it's a really big community, you feel like you know a huge chunk of the people here. It's worked really nicely. It took us years to master that. And there's definitely a lot of technical stuff behind the scenes, thoughtfully putting people into pods based on their personalities and stuff, which I don't know how we'll scale exactly that part, but yeah, it's worked really well for us.
That's really good. Yeah. Anytime you're moving in that small group experience, my first word of advice is make sure there's a leader who is at the front of that experience, because the small group experiences can quickly turn into micro ghost towns within your community, especially if you give them all spaces with no leadership.
Such a good way to put it. And I experienced that. That's how we landed here.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, what were some of the things that you tried that didn't work at first? What were some of the failed experiments?
Oh, I mean, the first thing we did was, okay, we're putting you all in accountability groups and you guys find time to meet.
Yeah, go hold each other accountable.
Yeah. And you know what? A couple of those groups did great because somebody stepped up as the leader.
Yes.
And a couple of those groups just, complete ghost town, completely disappeared. One of the groups at a certain point, they all left at the same time because I think they had a really good group and actually I was in a program where I did that. I was in a program where I was in a group that was self-led and we all left at the same time because we realized, well, this group, we're just meeting as a group and we don't have to keep paying for this because I'm getting a lot of value out of this group. Yeah. So I also was very wary of that happening in our program. But yeah, it was just a mess. And also when you're looking at people's personalities, there's certain personalities that are really good in group dynamics. Sometimes it only takes one person to come in and they're just always complaining and it brings the whole energy of the group down. And if there's no trained leader to manage that, it ruins the experience for the whole group. And here's an experience that's not even really your community or your training. It's just this added thing that you gave them and it's actually taking away. And they might have a bad experience because of that, and you're not controlling it. So it was a total mess.
Yeah. Yep. That I totally know what you're talking about. That's really good. And the other piece too that I love that you do is it's seasonal. Can you talk more about that? Has it always been seasonal?
What do you mean?
You reset after 6 months, you said?
Oh, the pods every quarter. So
every quarter.
We do planning. We do annual planning in January, and then we do a quarterly planning every quarter. And that's when we reset the pods. So there's a clear time where I re-announce the pods. I say, you can opt in again. If you can't do it this quarter, that's no problem. We'll be opting in again at the next quarterly planning. So it's just very streamlined at this point.
That's really good. This is for anybody listening who might have these accountability group, let's call them interest group or topic. A lot of people will try to do small groups around topics. And I see this go south so quickly without those two things, the leader, and then make it seasonal. And whether it's it resets every 3 months or this is like a seasonal small group program that only happens over summer. It just brings a fresh energy when you do that reset. But if you just launch it and are like, we're going to have small groups now, you can be held accountable in a group at any time. Now there's no good reason to join it at any time because you can always join it. So there's never a good reason to actually join it. So that's a really wonderful structure that you have set up. Thank you for sharing that. Pia, thank you so much for just all of the wisdom that you shared on this episode. I gleaned so many good pieces and it connected a lot of dots for me. So this was just a beautiful mosaic or tapestry of community building, and to see it through your eyes was such a gift. So thank you for doing the work and for sharing it with us here.
Thank you so much, Bree. This was such a beautiful conversation that I don't have that often because I'm usually not talking about the community itself. So it's actually really nice to reflect on it with you. And I appreciate your really thoughtful questions.
Thank you. All right. We'll see you, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing some space with me on this episode. Please like and review wherever you find your podcasts. To submit your own community conundrum, fiasco, or other drama, go to the link in the show notes. Aloha and catch you next time.